Actually, the final nail in the coffin was when I recently read the Harvard Business School has a case on Lululemon. And I read the case without knowing the follow on, and I did it right, so I didn't go and read what had happened. I did my analysis based on the information that I had. And this was just before a new female CEO took over. And my write up was to head for the hills. So prepare for bankruptcy, prepare for renegotiating your leases, prepare to massively cut the footprint. And actually, the woman who came on board did a fantastic turnaround, and sales tripled from the point at which the case ends, and share price more than tripled. And that was just a confirmation to me as to how little I know and understand about retail. And in that particular case, for Lululemon, I think to have analysed that well, the person analysing it well would have really had to understand the nature of the buyer, the nature of the in-store experience, and why this was different and special, and why this was set to continue to do what it was doing. For what I saw was something that was extremely hard to manage, a formula that maybe had worked right for a certain period of time, but there was no way for me to tell how long and over what. This store started in some regional part of Canada, so and I think that each retail story is another story like that. Each one is targeting a specific mind space, a specific shopping habit, a specific kind of person, and some of them will break through to being Walmarts, but predicting in advance which ones those will be is extremely hard. As you could just ask Bill Ackman with JCPenney and the CEO from Apple, and I think that Bill Ackman does a huge amount of work, and he may still be proven to be right, but it's very painful right now, and it's a circle of competence thing. So I think Joel Greenblatt has a sister. I think it's his sister who does retail investing. I think if you specialize in it, and if you spend all day talking to people in stores and observing shoppers' behavior, maybe you could get good at it. But there's no shame in saying that one doesn't need to invest in retail to make money. Or an example of that, because other than McDonald's at one point, I don't think I ever owned a retailer actually. Actually, that's not true. The first stock I ever bought was Burlington Coat Factory, a retailer.
So, Guy, you mentioned JCPenney there, and Bill Ackman has talked about the retail turnaround that they've been attempting so far, not very successfully, but also about the real estate story there, and even comparing it to companies like Simon and others. What if a retailer owns a lot of real estate, and you're essentially getting the retail business for free or cheap, as might be the case with Sears as well? Would you then ever consider it, or?
So I have not closely analyzed. The answer is, John, that my plan is to get through life without ever investing in a retailer, and I'm sure that I'll be very happy. Warren Buffett's plan was to get through life never investing in an airline, and he failed to execute on that plan and deeply regrets it. But his life would have been happier. I feel the same way about retail, and I haven't closely analyzed either JCPenney or Sears, but there are various things that can really throw an investor for a sort of a walk in the park or a loopy. So when I first looked at companies like, I think one was Tijon Ranch, another one was a big property owner in Florida, their name escapes me, but they own like 1/3 of Florida. And the first thing that one does is one applies a very conservative cost per acre, and you just say, oh my God, this thing is worth so much. But the real, you could value an oil company based on all the oil that's got on the ground, but there's a limitation to how quickly they can take the oil out and who they can sell it to. In the case of a landowner that owns, if I own one house, then that's a relatively liquid asset. If I own 1/3 of Florida, that's an extremely illiquid asset, and exactly how much of it I can develop at what value and the name escapes me, but it ended up, and the company I'm thinking about ended up being a very good short thesis by David Einhorn at
St. Joe.
St. Joe Corporation. I mean, I remember people that I respected telling me that it was great to be long St. Joe until David Einhorn did his presentation. So the issue with the real estate for retail in the United States is that this is not downtown, or this is not high street shopping the way you would have it in London or in some European city where your real estate is centrally located. What you're talking about is very dedicated spaces, sometimes self-standing in a shopping mall with roads driving up to them, and there's a questionable number as to what you would have to do to repurpose that space for another person to come in there, if it is all possible for another person to come in there, for another corporation to come in there. And different retailers are very, very specific about the space that they require. A Starbucks or a McDonald's is going to put up a box, and the kind of real estate that Sears has is just not appropriate for Starbucks and McDonald's. And then, so you have the repurposing of the real estate, the fact that it's sitting somewhere on the edge of one great big shopping mall, and you know, as quickly as a car can drive to one place, a car can drive to another place. If that shop sits empty, the cars don't drive there. It's not like it's the centre of town where there's definitely somebody who's going to fill the space. And then what I don't think, or this is really based more on conversations with smart people than verifying this for myself, but people don't look at the contingent liabilities of liquidating that real estate, of shutting down, environmental liabilities, maybe severance pay, all sorts of things that you need to do to potentially abandon a property. That the idea that this residual real estate is worth something. Now, I'm not Bill Ackman. Bill Ackman will say that's a very nice college try guy. Let me tell you the realities of how one makes this real estate valuable. But that's why Bill's invested in JCPenney and I'm not. And you know, we're not trying to be experts in all things. And I would also say that if you do something like you move from the United States to Zurich, if it's hard in the United States, then it's even harder in Zurich, basically. So I don't know if that's...
And it seems like the values of that kind of real estate and the health of the retail business actually correlate pretty highly. So when you would need to rely on the real estate values the most
is when the retail business, that's interesting. That's an interesting correlation I didn't think about. Is very, very interesting. But you know, I am actually trying to sell a house right now in about 50 kilometers outside of New York City, and it's been a lesson to me in how variable real estate is. And you know, that's a new distinction that John just gave, which is absolutely fascinating. The value of the real estate is highly correlated to the value of the underlying retail business, and when retail is good, the real estate is worth a lot more than when retail is not good, or when the specific kind of store that the real estate is purposed towards is doing well. So if big box department stores are doing well, then your land is fine. But if what you really want is small box McDonald's and Starbucks, then the big box spaces are not doing very well. It's not just where it's located; it's the kinds of price cycles that you get in with different locations. If you own any kind of piece of real estate in central Manhattan, your pricing variability through economic cycles is not that great. When you own a piece of real estate, an old house 50 kilometers outside of New York City, there are market cycles where you just can't sell it for any reasonable price, or the only way to sell it would be to put it at 50% of replacement value. So